The dust clung to everything like a second skin as I guided the iron-clad wagon relentless through the narrow pass into Vespera. The wheels groaned over the cracked stone road, each rut jarring my teeth. I had come for supplies, nothing more, nothing less. Dried rations, purified water skins, spare wheel spokes, and a few barrels of lamp oil. The war between the Citadel Alliance and the Human Dominion had shattered most trade routes, leaving only the cracks for men like me to slip through. I carried salt where salt was scarce iron, where forges stood cold and hardtack to places where supply lines had been cut clean. No banners, no lords, no protection, just the road and whatever coin I could scrape from the gaps. Vespera itself was a trading post built atop the bones of an old fortress wedged between red rock cliffs that baked under the sun like an oven. The air smelled of smoked meat, lamp oil, tanned hides, bitter herbs, strong liquor, and the sharp grit of hot stone. Every kind of creature moved through its crowded lanes, humans, orcs, dwarves, sand-scaled lizard folk, southern merchants in flowing silks, deserters with hollow eyes and wandering priests clutching holy symbols like shields. Voices clashed in a dozen tongues. Coins rang. Hammers struck anvils. It was the kind of place where anything could be bought if you had the right price or the right nerve. I stepped down from the wagon and walked into the main market square, boots crunching on loose gravel. The stares hit me immediately. Not the idle curiosity of travelers. These were wary, narrowed looks, the kind people give when they have heard too many stories about your kind. In the borderlands, humans had become something worse than enemies. We were the monsters in the tales, aggressive, unpredictable, skilled at war, and worst of all, eaters of anything that moved. The rumor had grown teeth over the years. They said we devoured any living thing when supplies ran low, that we smiled while we did it, that we looked at every other race the way a wolf eyes a flock. I tried the first stall run by a green-scaled merchant woman selling dried goods. I laid out my list and offered to pay 1.5 times the usual rate because times were hard. She glanced at the paper, then at my face, and backed away as if I had drawn a blade. Through her translation stone she said, "I do not sell to predators." I sighed. I thought she was joking. She wasn't. Her hands shook as she told me she had heard humans would eat anything that walked if food grew scarce. Just standing near her stall made her tremble. The second stall refused me the moment the owner heard my accent. The third locked its crates the instant I removed my gloves. At the fourth, an old man looked me dead in the eye and asked whether I was buying provisions or scouting meat on the hoof. By the time I reached the fifth stall, irritation had settled heavy in my chest. I was used to being mistrusted, but the weight of it still ground me down. This stall was smaller, neater than the rest. A young orc woman stood behind the wooden counter. She was smaller than most orc females. I had seen no towering warrior build, but still strong with deep green skin and long black hair tied back simply. Her eyes were large and golden amber, catching the lantern light like a cat's. Everything on her counter was arranged with care spice jars by color hardtack, sorted by age water skins, hung by size seeds and herbs, separated into tidy compartments. She wore the neutral trader's badge. She did not flinch when I approached. I set my hands on the counter and tried to keep my voice even. She looked me over from head to toe, then said, "You've been turned away from 4 stalls already." Still not giving up, I gave a tired half smile. 5th time might be the charm. She did not smile back right away. Instead, she asked the question everyone thought, but few dared speak outright. "Is it true? Your kind eats anything that moves." Before I could answer, a passing merchant swaggered by and called out with a laugh, "Careful there, little one. Buy from him, and he might eat the shopkeeper too when the bill comes due." The orc girl startled. She took half a step back, eyes widening, and the words tumbled out before she could stop them. "Don't eat me?" Human laughter rippled through the nearby stalls, some mocking, some uneasy, all waiting to see what the predator would do. I looked at her. Then I laughed. Not cruel, not mocking, but the weary sound of a man who had heard every twisted version of his own people and was tired of carrying them. I met her wide golden eyes and said, "Not the way you imagine." The words hung between us simple and quiet while the laughter around us slowly died. For the first time that day, someone had not run. And for the first time in longer than I cared to remember, I found myself wondering what would happen if I stayed long enough for her to ask the next question. After I spoke those words, the orc girl didn't relax right away. She stayed exactly where she was, both hands flat on the counter, golden amber eyes locked on mine like she was trying to peel back layers and see whether the predator everyone warned her about was really standing in front of her or just a tired man who had grown sick of the stories. She didn't close her stall. She didn't duck behind the wooden partition like the others had. She simply waited. I kept my hands visible and my voice steady. "My name is Jarek Thorn." She hesitated a moment, then said, "I am Pyrrha." The name was short-sharp and suited her small for an orc, yet her gaze carried the weight of someone who had already measured the world and found it wanting. I asked if she was truly willing to sell to me. She answered, "That depends on how you answer my questions." She didn't waste time on pleasantries. She asked the things that had turned my entire race into monsters in the eyes of the Borderlands. Did humans really hunt living creatures just for sport? Did we raise animals, give them names, and then slaughter them anyway? Had human soldiers truly eaten the flesh of other races during long campaigns, terrifying entire regions? I could have lied and made it sound cleaner. Instead, I told her the truth because anything less would have made her walk away. "Yes," I said. "Humans eat almost anything. We have hunting grounds, feast days, history soaked in blood and shame. Some of those stories you heard are built on real bones." I met her eyes without flinching. "But eating meat does not mean eating anything that can speak. There is a line between livestock and thinking beings, between creatures that live by instinct and those that build societies, speak and feel fear the way we do. Once something has a mind and a culture, no one has the right to see it as food, not even when we're starving." The market noise around us had quieted. A few merchants had stopped pretending to work and were listening openly now. An old scholar with gray-scaled skin pushed closer and cut in. "Your people once declared entire races unworthy of life so you could exploit them. How do I know you won't do the same to us?" The question landed heavier than any joke about eating. It struck at the real wounds, not the exaggerated ones. I didn't dodge it. "You're right," I answered. "We have done that to our own kind. It is a stain that will never wash off. But if you're asking whether I plan to repeat it here with any of you, the answer is no." The square grew quieter still. Pyrrha studied me for a long time, her amber eyes searching. Then, in a softer voice than before, she asked the question that made every nearby conversation die completely. "If you were starving to death, and only I was left here, would you eat me?" The silence that followed was absolute. No laughter now, no mocking calls, just the low crackle of oil lamps and the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer. I took a breath and answered carefully, honestly. I would eat the leather off my own boots first. I would eat moss from the walls. I would chew my belt, my cloak, the straps on my wagon, anything that doesn't breathe, doesn't speak, doesn't dream. But you are a person. There are lines that are not crossed even when the road ends. Pyrrha said nothing for several heartbeats. Then the corner of her mouth twitched. She pressed her lips together, and a small, reluctant smile broke through the first real one I had seen on her face. It lit her eyes like a lantern behind amber glass. "So humans really are terrifying," she said. I raised an eyebrow. She continued, voice lighter now. "Terrifying because you can talk about eating your own belt, like it's the most ordinary thing in the world." I laughed. Then a short surprise sound that slipped out before I could stop it. She laughed too, just a quiet huff, but real. For the first time since I had stepped into Vespera, the air between us felt easy instead of edged with fear. Pyrrha turned and began pulling goods from her neatly arranged shelves, packets of dense travel breadwater skins, treated to stay fresh for weeks, coarse salt, small casks of lamp oil. She gave me fair measure and fair price, but she added one condition. "Next time you come back," she said, "tell me more about humans, not the stories everyone repeats. The truth." I asked, "That's all." She nodded once. I paid her, loaded the supplies into the wagon, and left the stall. But I already knew the transaction had stopped being about bread and oil the moment she chose not to run. And I knew I would be back tomorrow. Not because I needed more supplies, but because for the first time in years, someone had looked at the monster the world said I was and asked to see the man instead. In the days that followed, I found more reasons than I needed to return to Pyrrha's stall. The wagon required new spokes. The axle needed greasing. I suddenly remembered I was low on salt and could use extra packets of dried herbs for the road. Each time I told myself it was practical. Each time I knew it was a lie. Pyrrha never called me on it. She simply kept 2 cups of bitter grass tea waiting on the counter whenever my shadow fell across her neatly arranged wares. The tea was strong and earthy, the kind that cleared the dust from your throat and made you want to stay a little longer. I would lean against the wood and we would talk while the market hummed around us. At first, she asked about the rumors she had grown up hearing. They say your people smile before they hunt. She told me one slow afternoon when the sun baked the red cliffs and customers were scarce, that you build enormous farms just to cage animals and call it civilization, that you are kind only long enough to take what you want. Her golden eyes never left mine. Are any of those things true? I could have softened the truth. Instead, I gave it to her raw. Some of them, I said. Humans have hunted for sport. We have built cages and called them progress. We have worn kindness like a mask when it suited us. We have started wars with each other and with everyone else. There have been famines that turned men into beasts. There have been lords who emptied entire valleys of game and called it glory. I paused, then added quietly, and yes, there have been times when my kind looked at other races, the way a butcher eyes livestock. Those stories you heard, they didn't come from nothing. She listened without flinching. Then she told me something of her own. She had not always sold spices and hardtack from a wooden stall. For 2 years she had served as a scribe for a neutral delegation that traveled between the Citadel Alliance and the Human Dominion recording treaties and border disputes. She had read every report, every accusation, every eyewitness account of what humans were capable of. That was where the fear had taken root. And that was also where the curiosity had begun, because the more she read, the more she wondered whether the monster on paper could possibly be the same as the man standing in front of her now. I left the delegation, she said, arranging a row of seed packets with precise fingers. I wanted to see the world without a ledger between me and it. So I came here and opened this stall. Alone. Safer that way. She gave a small wry smile. Or so I thought until a certain human kept walking up to my counter. The air between us had changed. It was no longer sharp with suspicion. One afternoon, when a hot wind whipped red dust across the market, I helped her pull the heavy canvas awning down to shield her goods. Our hands brushed as we worked the ropes. She did not jerk away the way she had the first time. The touch lingered for half a heartbeat, warm green skin against mine, then she drew back, not from fear, but from surprise at herself. After that, the questions grew smaller, more personal. Where did I sleep when I was on the road inside the wagon or in the open? What did I eat when supplies ran low? Did I have family waiting somewhere? I answered each one honestly, and I began asking in return. Was she ever afraid running a stall by herself? Had she ever thought of leaving Vespera for good? The silences between our words stopped feeling dangerous. One evening, I was late. A group of drunken caravan guards had decided a lone human made an easy target near the outer gate. They wanted sport. I gave them a split lip and a black eye instead, but I took a solid punch that left my own mouth bleeding. I cleaned up as best I could and still walked to her stall the next morning. Pyrrha took one look at the swelling and the dried blood on my chin. Her brows drew together. Without a word, she reached under the counter, pulled out a small clay jar of ointment, and slid it across the wood. "If you know they hate you this much," she said, voice tight, "why do you keep smiling in their faces?" I tried to grin, winced at the pain, and shrugged. "If I stop smiling, the road gets too gray." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, soft enough that only I could hear, "Not everyone is worth wearing yourself down for." I realized then that I no longer came to her stall out of curiosity or stubbornness. I came because the hours between visits felt longer than they should. And when I arrived late that afternoon and she looked up from stacking water skins, the relief that crossed her face was unmistakable. "I thought you weren't coming today," she said. The simple sentence stopped me cold. It meant she had been waiting. It meant I was no longer the only one counting the hours. Before I left her stall that evening, she asked one last question, her voice quieter than the market noise around us. If the whole station called me a fool for trusting a human, what would you think I looked at her at the small orc woman who had once shouted, "Don't eat me in front of half the market," and answered without hesitation? I would think they were missing the sharpest eyes in this entire station. Color rose faintly beneath the green of her cheeks. She turned away quickly and pretended to straighten a row of jars that were already perfectly straight. I walked back to my wagon with something warm and unfamiliar lodged behind my ribs, the simple, dangerous hope of seeing her again tomorrow. The rumors spread faster than dust in a Vespera windstorm. Within days, the entire market knew that the human wagon master kept returning to the small orc girl's stall. Some laughed and made crude jokes. Others watched with narrowed eyes. A few stopped pretending to be friendly when I passed their counters. The air around Pyrrha's neatly arranged spices grew heavier each afternoon, thick with disapproval, and something sharper fear that one of their own was standing too close to the monster they had been warned about all their lives. One midday, the old gray-scaled scholar returned. He had questioned me weeks earlier about human history. This time, he did not speak to me. He planted himself directly in front of Pyrrha's counter while I stood beside it and asked her loud enough for half the lane to hear. "If he grows hungry, girl, do you still believe you are safe? You trust a smile and a few soft words? Or have you forgotten what his kind have done to ours?" The question was aimed at me, but it cut straight into the fear Pyrrha had carried since the first day. I opened my mouth to answer, but she spoke first, voice steady, though her hands tightened on the edge of the counter. I trust the way he answers when he does not need to make the answer pretty. Her words hung in the sudden quiet. The scholar stared, then turned and walked away without another word. For the first time, she had openly stood beside me in front of everyone. That night the market stayed open late because a large caravan had just arrived. Lanterns burned brighter, voices rose higher. Coins changed hands in the torchlight. Pyrrha's stall was busy. I had come to help her close after the rush the way I had begun doing without either of us naming it. We were folding canvas when 3 men in dusty traveler cloaks stepped up. They looked ordinary until one of them moved behind the counter faster than a man should and locked his arm around Pyrrha's throat. A knife flashed against the soft green skin beneath her jaw. "Everyone back," he snarled. "The orc has trading tokens and easy goods. Touch a weapon and she dies." The second man overturned her strongbox, while the third kept the growing crowd at bay with a drawn short sword. The one holding Pyrrha pressed the blade harder and shouted straight at me. "You humans stay where you are, unless you want to watch me carve your little pet, while the whole station sees what your kind really does for sport." Pyrrha's golden eyes found mine across the few feet between us. In that instant, I saw the fear I had dreaded, not that the robbers would kill her, but that I would finally prove every story true. That I would charge in like the predator they all expected Teeth bared, turning the night into a slaughter that would confirm every nightmare she had been raised on. Her gaze begged me silently, "Don't become what they say you are." I did not draw my knife. I did not lunge. Instead, I kept my hands open and spoke calmly, almost conversationally, drawing the leader's attention fully onto myself. "You picked the wrong stall tonight. Let her go, and you might still walk out with your lives." He laughed. Big talk for a lone human. While he mocked me, I took one careful step sideways, boot, nudging the heavy iron lantern that sat at the corner of the next stall. The flame inside was still high. I kicked it over in one smooth motion. Burning oil spilled across the canvas awning stretched above us. Fire roared up in a sudden bright sheet. The robber holding Pyrrha jerked his head toward the flames. In that half-second, she drove her elbow hard into his stomach. The knife wavered. I moved. I caught his knife wrist twisted until bone creaked, slammed his face down onto the counter hard enough to stun but not kill. The blade clattered away. The other 2 robbers hesitated, one because of the spreading fire, the other because the crowd was no longer backing away. Within moments, station guards arrived, drawn by the shouting and the flames. The 3 men were dragged off, still cursing. The fire was beaten out quickly. The market settled, but the stares had changed. People had watched me disarm a man with a knife to Pyrrha's throat without turning the night red. They had seen control where they expected savagery. The fear in their eyes cracked open a little wider. Pyrrha stood behind her counter, breathing fast, one hand pressed to the small cut on her throat. When the guards finally left, she looked at me as though seeing me for the first time. I asked quietly if she was hurt. She shook her head. Then, voice barely above a whisper, she said, "Now I understand." I waited. She met my eyes. "When you said, 'not the way you imagine,'" I helped her right the overturned crates and sweep ash from the counter. When the last splinter of wood was cleared, she reached across the space between us and touched my wrist with 2 fingers light, deliberate, no longer pulling away. Her skin was warm. "I was afraid," she said, "I know. Not of them." Her voice dropped even lower. "I was afraid I had trusted the wrong person. That you would prove them right." I covered her hand with mine for a moment, feeling the faint tremble that still lingered there. "Then it's a good thing you didn't trust the wrong person." She did not pull away. For the first time since that first startled cry of "don't eat me," the distance between us had disappeared completely. The market noise slowly returned around us, but neither of us moved. We simply stood there, her fingers resting against my wrist while the lanterns burned lower and the red cliffs cooled under the night sky. The new eastern route opened sooner than I expected. A narrow pass through the red cliffs had finally been cleared after the last skirmish, and caravans were already moving. If I waited any longer, I would lose the best-paying contracts of the season. The Relentless was loaded, repaired, and ready. There was no honest way to delay. I told Pyrrha at the end of a quiet afternoon when the market had thinned and the long shadows of the cliffs stretched across her stall. I kept my voice steady the same way I had spoken the first time we met. "I have to leave tomorrow at first light." She was arranging water skins. Her hands paused for a heartbeat, then continued as if the words had not landed. When she finally looked up, her golden eyes were carefully calm, but I had learned to read the small tension at the corner of her mouth. "That is the way of it," she said. "A man like you cannot stay planted in one trading post forever." The words were reasonable. The tone was not. It sounded like someone trying very hard to sound reasonable. We stood on opposite sides of the counter the way we had hundreds of times, yet everything felt different. I did not want pretty lies between us now. At first I came back, because you were the only one who asked instead of running, I told her. Later, I came back because it was you. Pyrrha's fingers tightened on the strap of a water skin. She met my eyes without blinking. At first, I let you stay because I wanted to see whether a human could be what you claimed, she said. Later, I let you stay because I wanted to see you. The market noise seemed to pull back, leaving only the space between us. She drew a slow breath. At the beginning, I was afraid you would eat me. Then I was afraid I would become a joke for trusting you. Now I am afraid of something worse. Her voice dropped until I had to lean in to hear. I am afraid you will leave like every other traveler, and I will stand behind this counter every afternoon with all my neat rows of spice and bread and water, knowing the one thing that made the days different is gone. The confession sat raw between us. I felt it like a hook behind my ribs. I reached across the counter and took her hand the way she had taken mine after the robbery open, deliberate, no longer afraid of what touching might mean. I will come back, I said. Not because it sounds nice, not because you need to hear it. I will come back, because if I do not, I will spend the rest of my life knowing I walked away from the only person who ever looked at the monster they warned her about and still chose to see the man. Pyrrha searched my face for a long moment. Then she reached beneath the counter and brought out a thin braided cord of red and black thread. A small polished bone bead carved with a simple mountain rune hung from it. She tied it around my left wrist with careful, steady fingers. The bead was warm from her palm. This is a road ward of my people, she said quietly. We give it only to those we want to see return whole. Not lovers, not friends. Something quieter. Something that says there is a place worth coming back to. Her hands lingered on my wrist after the knot was tied. They trembled once lightly, then stilled. I touched the bead with my thumb. So you no longer fear I will eat you. She gave a soft huff of laughter, the same small sound she had made the first time we truly smiled at each other. "I still think humans are terrifying," she said. She stepped close enough that I could smell the faint spice and dust on her skin. "Only now I know you are terrifying in the way that makes someone want to believe anyway." I smiled the kind of smile that hurts because it is honest. The next morning, the Relentless rolled out of Vespera's stone gate just as the first light touched the red cliffs. I looked back once. Pyrrha stood behind her counter exactly where I had first seen her small green skin surrounded by tidy rows of goods. The market was already waking loud and chaotic, but her golden eyes found mine across the distance and held. She was no longer the girl who had cried, "Don't eat me human," in front of half the station. She was the woman who had chosen to stay to listen to Trust when every story told her not to. The wagon creaked forward. The bead on my wrist clicked gently against the reins. I kept it there where I could feel it with every turn of the road. The story had begun with the most ridiculous fear imaginable. One small orc girl terrified a human would eat her. It ended with something far larger, two people from opposite sides of every rumor and war who had sat down long enough to ask the truth of each other. And sometimes that is how the important things start. Not with destiny, not with grand declarations, but with one frightened question and one honest answer that refuses to let the fear win. I flicked the reins and pointed the Relentless east, already counting the days until the road would bring me back to Vespera.